Hello, this is Alger Podcast, episode 28. You can get more information about consulting or other podcasts on my website, which is algercoaching.com. That's A-L-G-E-R, algercoaching.com. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I got with me a good friend of mine, Michael Strong, who owns Strong Pool Services in the Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln area. Thanks for being on the show, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Michael and I used to work together. In fact, Michael worked for me at one point in time, and now we work together on other projects, and like this one. So yeah, thanks for being on the show, Michael. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I was actually born at Beale Air Force Base. My parents were both in the Air Force, and my dad served for 20 years. When I was 1, we moved to Aviano, Italy, and we were actually there for 8 years before he got stationed back at Beale Air Force Base when I was about 9 years old. A year later, we moved up to Grass Valley, a little town in Nevada County, and I've been there ever since for the last 25 years or so.
Wow. I did not realize that. So you've been all over the place.
Yes, a little bit. We got to travel quite a bit when we were overseas. Everything's so close there. You take 2-hour drive and you could be in 2 different countries and whatnot. But yeah, so now, like I said, back in Nevada County, we've got a blended family of 4 kids, with one goes to Chico State, got another who's a junior in high school, and then 2 littles, 9 and 6 years old.
Oh yeah, so you got quite a spread there.
Quite a bit, yes.
Good stuff. Now, right now you own your own business, and you got a wonderful family, a lot of good things going for you, but it wasn't always like that.
No, not at all. Very fortunate to be where I'm at right now. That's for sure. I love being a business owner, and I've had a lot of help to get to this point in my life. But, I'd say things kind of all started to turn around about 4.5 years ago. Yeah. And
turn around what way?
In a good way. I would say in a very positive way from where I was at 4.5 years ago. And actually, I can remember the day that everything turned for me. It was September 3rd, 2019. It's 2 days after my son's birthday. I had gotten done with work that day, and I needed to make one more stop before the day was over.
So one more stop. You were in the pest control industry, so you had one more account or whatever to go to.
Yes, yeah, and it was actually a customer that was very close to. But I had to go to a therapy appointment first. In between there, I didn't really necessarily want to go to the therapy appointment that day. I just wanted to get the day over with and go home. But either way, I dragged myself to this therapy appointment, and while I was there, we were going over a few situations, and at one point I described to my therapist that I wasn't doing well, to the extent that I actually wrote some letters to my family because I wasn't in a good spot.
Yeah.
And, so she asked me about the content of these letters, and you know what? They were suicide letters.
Oof.
So I had written them out to my brother, my parents, my kids. I was pretty much done at that point, and I had wrote them the day before. So we talked a little bit more on it, and as we were finishing up the session and I was getting ready to leave, my therapist said, Michael, we got some options that I want to go over with you right now. And I said, oh, okay. What do you got? He said, well, you can let me drive you to the hospital right now, or I can let you leave and I'll have to call the cops, because at this point you're an endanger to yourself and others. So I sat there for a good 5 minutes because I didn't quite know what to do. And honestly, in my mindset, I actually thought I made a huge mistake by telling her about the letters.
Wow.
So
now, what were you in the moment? What were you hoping to accomplish about talking to her about these letters? Because you had plans for the next day.
Right. I didn't quite know it. It just almost felt like a slip that I had said something about it. I think that we're going over something. There was a little bit of frustration, and it kind of just admitted that I had wrote out these letters. And that's when she was able to get into the content of the letters and everything like that, and kind of expose it. But again, my mindset was, God, I can't believe I made that mistake. Like, that's a terrible thing to think at this point. But in that moment,
it's safe to say that you had a sick mind at the time.
Extremely.
So things were different, we can kind of unpack that later, but you're not really thinking with a healthy mind. So it's very, very different, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was pretty terrible at that point. So after sitting there for 5 minutes, I was in my work vehicle still, because I still had something to do right after that. And I was happy that I was able to think at least this clearly at that point. I said, well, I guess I got to let you take me to the hospital, because I'm not going to run in my work truck, and also because I wanted to try to hide this as much as possible.
Yeah.
So that was...
Yeah, there's a certain stigma that goes along with these types of things that you're probably thinking about, I assume. Is that right or no?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, everything's crossing my mind. Who's going to find this out? What next? Like, I was really lost at that point. And the only thing that I'm trying to figure out is, how do I get out of this situation now with minimal damage of people finding out my situation? So we made our way over to the hospital. Now, check-in took a long time. It was an hour and a half. So the entire time I'm just scheming, how do I get out of this place?
Yeah.
Still knowing that I can't run necessarily. And they got everything kind of on lockdown at that point, and whatnot. So as I got settled in, hour and a half goes by or so. A different therapist that works for the hospital comes in, introduces herself, and we go over some things. She goes, okay, well, you're going to be here for minimum 72 hours. And I go, man, okay. I didn't realize that.
Wow.
The guy, because, I'd never been in this situation, never knew anybody who spent time in the hospital. So I didn't quite understand that it's a 72-hour hold, essentially, once you put yourself in.
So you didn't know you were going to be there at least 3 days.
At least
you said something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she said, possibly longer. We may have to send you out to Santa Rosa for 2 weeks, because you're in a pretty desperate situation, is what they were calling it. So then now my mind's really spinning at that point. And she goes, well, what we need to do first, though, is you're going to have to make some phone calls to let people know where you're at and everything. And I go, I'm not making any phone calls. I don't care what you say. She goes, well, Michael, that's fine. You don't have to. But we're just going to send you to Santa Rosa right now. And you're probably going to be there a month at this point.
And Santa Rosa is what?
Santa Rosa is a bigger facility, more resources and everything like that, can monitor you a bit more. And it's going to be an even more lockdown, essentially. I didn't get tremendous details on it, but enough to
enough to know that Santa Rosa was not a place you wanted to go. You might have needed to go, but it wasn't a place you wanted to go. Okay.
Right, absolutely. And when they had said, you're probably going to be there a month in, I mean, it depends on how much you want to cooperate. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm going to cooperate, because I don't want to go to Santa Rosa. I don't want to spend 2 weeks or a month, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I go, okay, well, I guess I got to call my boss, because I'm not showing up to work for the next 3 days. And at that time, I was very close with our supervisors that we had. And I did not want to make that call at all. So I'm not making that call. And then you and I at that point weren't on the same level that I was with the supervisors of closeness. It's like we were familiar with each other, but with them I had a little bit more in depth, because we worked together a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I elected to call you first, because it felt the easiest phone call on that day. Ended up being one of the harder ones, because it was the first one, not realizing it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I remember I called you, and I remember the first thing you said to me, and it was one of the things that probably got me to take that first step. Is you go, Michael, I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay,
but
can we back up just a little bit, Michael?
Yes.
So I'm in the garage at my house, and we ended up on the phone, and I have no idea what this is about. Mm-hmm. And because you're not going to be able to go to work, and so you're close to the supervisors that work for me, but you felt more comfortable talking to me at the moment, just because we knew each other pretty well, but but we didn't work together day to day. You were more day to day with the supervisors, and so I get the call I actually got a text from you, hey, can you give me a call? And I thought, I don't know what, okay. So I called, and
Yeah.
then that sets up the phone call.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, the first thing you said to me was, Michael, I want you to trust the process that you're about to go through. And I thought that was huge. Because I didn't know what I was expecting to hear. I don't think it was that though, for sure.
What were you worried about? What was going through your mind?
There was definitely embarrassment for sure.
Yeah.
And that was because I was so closed up at that point. I mean, I had a therapist that I was seeing weekly, but it was halfway in, halfway out. You know, it was like, yeah, I'm here physically, but I'm not working. So yeah, the embarrassment of it, because I didn't really talk all that much about these issues and situations, so that it was new for me to admit to somebody outside of, you know, that particular person, and let's just say like my brother, you know, he had some inkling of it.
So we don't know each other well enough. Your mind is maybe all over the place as to how I might react to that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and it was good though at that point, because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody. But then you made another great decision after that, which was, hang on one sec, we've got to get Scott on the phone, who was my supervisor at that time, who was the person I didn't want to know. And but it was so huge, because it was, again, another step of, well, we got to open this up. So we got Scott on the phone, and we walked through and had that conversation, which was, I don't know if it was great, but it was great for the overall. It was great.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it was very, very tough.
And Scott was a chaplain, so he had some training in those types of things to help.
Yes. Yeah.
know? And we didn't talk about this until until we started putting together some of the details of the podcast. But I've lost some friends to suicide. Mm-hmm. I lost a really close friend of mine to suicide. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I didn't want to unload that on you while we're having that conversation, but that hit different for me when somebody's talking about, hey, my therapist wants me to, get checked in because things aren't good right now. I wish I had that chance with my friend.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really do wish I had that chance with them. And it's something I thought about a lot, over the years, is what's the difference between your situation, and others. But let's get to that in a minute. Let's finish telling the story. Mm-hmm. And so you talked to me, and then end up talking to one of the other supervisors, and pretty much everybody's real encouraging, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It was great because there was a few things that we were able to lift off my shoulders, which one was work. We didn't have to worry about that. I was going to be able to take leave and everything like that, and didn't have to worry about the financials, nothing like that. And my job was going to be there for me, however long this took. So that was the first initial of like, okay, all right, we got some stuff. I told somebody, I go back, I talked to a therapist. I said, here's who I called. I'm glad I don't have to worry about work or anything like that. And they go, okay, good. I said, well, Michael, you're going to have to make some more phone calls. I'm like, I'm not making any more phone calls. Like, you got enough phone calls out of me. She's like, well, Santa Rosa, are you going to make some more phone calls? I was like, all right. So I guess I got to make some more phone calls. And it just kind of led into telling, my close friends, my family, letting them all know. And they're there listening to these calls, so they want to know. They're going to make sure that I'm doing it. So that's the other thing. They're not allowing me to lie about it or anything like that. So
the therapist is sitting there listening to you make these calls. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, yeah, because they understood the magnitude of me not wanting to talk, so they were doing what was best for me. As far as, you don't want to go to Santa Rosa, but we need you to make these calls. You need to make these calls. It is beneficial for you. So they knew, they've dealt with this before. So it's not their first time dealing with this type of situation. I'm sure they've had successes and maybe unsuccessful attempts, but I'm sure they've had successes, and that's why they are not making me do this. They're giving me the choice of, this is what you could do and end up, or this is what you could do and end up. So it was beneficial in that moment to be able to do that. That's for sure.
Wow. Wow. So then what? I mean, what happens after that? Like you make these phone calls. Who all did you call? You said you called some friends. You called your
Yep.
mom, right?
I actually didn't get a hold of my parents because at that point it was pretty late, and they were in Texas at the time, and they go to bed at 6, 7 o'clock at night. So at that point it was about 7 o'clock our time, so it was 9 o'clock there.
So it was really late for them.
Yeah, it was really late. So I had reached out to my brother and my best friend, let them know what was going on. My brother got in contact with my parents, and my parents actually ended up flying out a week later and whatnot, which was important. But yeah, so I got through though the 72 hours, which was a lot of therapy because there's nothing to do there. I mean, you've got nothing. There's no TVs or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
I was allowed my cell phone, but again, that's just limited to what you can do.
So you have your own room and a cell phone and
And then a lot of garbage food.
the food's no good.
Food's no good. So that was the other thing is that I was glad I told my best friend because then he was bringing me food. And so that was giving him an opportunity for us to talk. And it was just somebody else who knew the situation and what was going on. And there was some relief there as well of like, oh, well, I started to feel better about my situation because I got to feel the support and the love that I really didn't know was out there at the time.
You had a lot of support.
A tremendous amount, that's for sure. Those initial days.
I know that, as people at the office at the time that we worked together there was 35 or 40 people in that office. Everybody was supportive. I'm not aware of anybody that wasn't supportive.
Right. Yeah, and it was.
On sorry to interrupt, but on one hand, I'm thinking when you're sitting there and you're hurting, and your mind is broken, whatever, sick, whatever you want to say. I imagine it's hard to realize how many people care.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And more so though, what I'd like to ask, because I like that you bring that up on what the mindset is. I'm actually interested on the other side of it, your side of it and your mindset of one, kind of how you view it and what you think somebody's going through, but also what is it that you went through? Because that's what I'd like to know to sort of bridge that gap of what you thought went on. And then I can kind of piece together
So I don't know, and that's the thing. I don't know. I lost a good friend to suicide. He was a great person. He was a wonderful friend. He was an incredibly outgoing type person that everybody loved. Like he was a kind of like, I know people talk after somebody passes often. The opinions of those people go in a really dramatic and high and positive way. That's not the case with this guy. Like he walked into a room and everybody started smiling because you knew you were about ready to laugh. He's a great guy. So the best way I could describe it is I don't know. Now, but what I can tell you, and the best story that I heard, I don't remember who said this, but the best story that I heard to describe it was describing a suicide bomber. So there was a video that I watched, and a guy who's, I guess his job was to investigate suicide bombers. So obviously the suicide bomber, their mind is to go and create the most damage possible. So they go into a restaurant or a building or whatever where there's a lot of people. They get around and they detonate themselves and chaos ensues, right? And so he comes in after the fact to investigate and figure out where the bomber was. And he said, obviously, the closer the person was to where the bomb went off, the more damage there is, and the further away they are from the bomber, the lesser the damage becomes, right? So the closer you are to the bomber, the more damage. So they're able to zero in on exactly where the bomber stood because the people that are the closest to that bomber have the most damage, and it's the same thing with all suicides.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with all suicides. The closer you are to the person, the more damage there is. And in doubt, I kept waiting. to find a letter or some explanation as to why my friend did that. It is so confusing. And so when I say when you ask me to describe that and I say I don't know, it's been quite a few years, 2009 when my friend passed. So it's been quite a few years and I still don't know. I still don't understand. And so I think that's one of the things that is difficult, in the sense that your mind always wonders, like, what if? You know what I mean? Like, I can say that there were a lot of cool things that we shared together and that I shared with him. And I don't want to tell his story. I'm only going to tell my story. There's a lot of cool things, and so I don't have a lot of regrets as far as what I should have done or could have done, but you can't help but wonder, was there one more thing, or was there what? And what I'm most interested in, to kind of volley it back to you, is, in my mind, there's a moment where you need help, I think. I don't know. I think there's a moment where a person decides, I don't want to get help. Maybe it's embarrassment. Maybe it's I don't want to be a burden. But man, you think about that suicide bomber. You think about the people that care. You think about, like, Michael, I want to ask you, when you made the announcement that this was what was going on, and you were going into a mental hospital, right? I mean, that's what it was. That couldn't have felt good. Did anybody condemn you for that?
No, actually, I don't think anybody did at all.
So, I mean, I got to say, like, if you're listening and something like that is on your mind, you might be in a little bit of a different situation than Michael, in the sense that maybe not everybody will support you. Who knows? But there is so much support out there. And I think one of the things that's the most interesting to me, Michael, or the most that's on my mind with this, is why my friend, there was a moment in time when a decision was made. And I don't understand why someone would choose that. Why someone would not know that suicide bomber scenario, not realize that when they decide to remove themselves from the world, that it's going to leave an effect. Like, how is that not on your mind? Or is it on your mind? And somehow it's rationalized. Because one thing, before you answer, one thing I do know is a sick mind is not capable of rationalizing and thinking in the same way. So like, as we're talking, I've known two versions of you, right? So there's a sick mind, and I there might be a better word for it. I don't know, but there's a mind that is not healthy. It's not well. And today you have a healthy mind, and so you're one of the few people I know, or at least that talks about this, that can have this conversation. What causes one person to go this direction? What causes the other person to go a different direction? What was the difference? Like you could have no-showed the appointment. You could have not talked about the letters. You could have ran. You could have gotten away long enough to accomplish the goal that you were planning. Why didn't you?
I look back on that day, and I do believe that I had some fortune in kind of how it unraveled. Like I said, when I said that I believed I made a mistake in disclosing of the letters, it ended up not being that. So that was one fortunate thing that happened. On top of that was my therapist quick thinking at that moment, and being able to essentially corral some of my thoughts, and then giving me kind of the ultimatum of choices that I had. And maybe fortunate that I was in my work truck and for some reason thought rationally. So I think about that all the time, that I think maybe there was just some fortunate circumstances that ended up accidentally putting me in that situation. I think that's kind of how I describe it. And
but it doesn't sound like
No, I really don't know.
So if you knew the answer, what would it be?
Lucky. It's so hard to just pinpoint, how that unfolded. Because again, I do think about it. I think about, oh wow. I mean, I said that, and all these events happened right afterwards. The call to you and to Scott, and all those things happened, which started to build towards the recovery and everything. But in the moment, it's really hard to say, why did it work for me? And I still question that sometimes. Why me? Why did I make it out? There's so many people who don't make it out either.
Yeah.
That go through and follow through with that commitment.
And I didn't see this before we literally started recording, because you had a sweater on, but you're wearing a t-shirt that says "Stronger Than Suicide."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's
talk about that.
It means so much to me. And this, this shirt represents everybody who's still alive. Whether you dealt with depression on a deep end or not. Suicide's not a normal thing. That's why it's so damaging when that happens. So for me, it's something that I believe in. It's something that I lean on, that I am stronger. Like I know I'm stronger and whatnot. And it's just, I carry that with me every day. And again, I'm happy that I do. And I'm happy that I get to share this shirt and everybody can see it. But back to the mindset and everything to get to that point. Our minds are extremely powerful, and people underestimate how powerful the mind is. I give a good example of a powerful mind. You look at Michael Jordan. When you get to the NBA level, everybody's an athlete and everybody's good. But what separates greats is the mental mindset to go that far. I mean, and Michael Jordan was probably arguably the best person to do not just his craft, but out of anybody who knows anything about their job, he's probably the best person to ever do his job. And it was because of his mental fortitude.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue that at least he is one of the best, if not the best.
Yes. And so he has one of the most powerful minds, and he used it for greatness and whatnot. At the same time, your mind can work the opposite and work against you. So not only can it get you to the highest of heights, it can get you to the lowest of lows.
Yeah. How?
And I always say that, and because I think I see this a lot, and I felt this. It's very easy to play the victim. It's very easy to be negative. It's a lot easier, it seems like, than to find the positive of something. It's just easy just to kind of steamroll yourself into a negative mindset, as I like to call it. And it starts small. You don't get there in a day. You don't get there in a week. It takes years, and you slowly.
But I feel like somewhere along the line, there's one negative thought that sort of creeps in your mind, and you roll with it.
Yeah.
And that's like the seed that's planted, right? Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, anything like that at all. So certainly there's room for other things, obviously.
Yeah.
However, if you've got a healthy mind, and this is one of the things that I really want to to make a point with. If you've got a healthy mind, and you begin with allowing those negative thoughts to come and stay and ruminate on and believe, oh man, I'm not as successful as I should have been. I'm not, I feel like that's kind of the beginning of it.
That's exactly how it is. That is the beginning towards a spiral. Because then at that point, it turns into a bit of an obsession. You're obsessing over that issue and that problem. And then another issue comes up, and then you obsess about that one. And then another one comes up, and you're like, see, this always happens to me. I can't get out of my own way. You start to condition your mind. It's almost like weight training at that point. You are conditioning your mind to view the world negatively. And then when you start obsessing.
So you're saying you're in control of this?
Yes. Yeah.
But does it feel like it?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't feel like you. You just think everything is against you. And I don't want to speak, there's some people who have such severe depression that, it could be something wrong with your wires in your head. That is a thing too. So I don't want to dismiss that everybody has control. But the most part, a lot of people have control.
Yeah.
And again, it takes years to get to that point. And that's what happened with me, is that it started a while back, probably a few 10, 12 years before that even. And it just slowly but surely, and you have your highs and lows and everything like that, but you always feel the lows even more. And especially when you're dealing with depression, it's not something that goes away. It's there with you. And it's just, how are you going to manage it? And everybody goes through depression too. I do want to say that as well. At some point in your life, you go through that little ebb.
There's ups and downs.
Yes, yeah.
But the problem is as you go through your ups and downs, when you go through a down,
do you allow yourself to come up? Yeah.
I like that word, allow.
Yeah. And that's what I was doing, is I had allowed myself to stay down. So then when I would come up a little bit, it was never going to be at my height, because the level of my mind and the lid of my mind at that point was so low that I couldn't grow past that.
Why?
I was so into my head of how terrible of a person I was.
Wow.
That's what I'm convincing myself at that point. It's not that I was a terrible person at that point. I wasn't. But in my mind, I was. And so now you start to go down that path. So not only are you negative about everything happening to you, now you're just saying to yourself, well, see, it is all my fault while I'm here.
Well, and then the mind is so powerful that if we decide something, we look for evidence to support what we've decided. It's not, I wish it was the other way around.
Yeah.
But it's not always the other way around. So if we decide that we're no good,
yeah,
you might be stepping over evidence in the contrary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you got kids, you got family, you got some really close friends. Like I've met some of your friends, and you're lucky. Not everybody has friends like that. Like you're lucky to have the friends that you have,
right? And
the family that you have. And yet somehow
I missed all that.
You missed it.
Missed it. Completely missed it. I had convinced myself that I was doing what was best for them. That's where that irrational thought process comes in once you get to that point where you want to make that decision. So obviously you have all that build up to that point. But then when you reach that point, that is the mindset that people are going to be much happier without me. I believed that my kids were going to be better off without me here. Wholeheartedly. I thought I was doing the best thing for them.
Wow.
And I think that's where it's really hard for people to understand, is that the mind is just so powerful and can be so poisonous at times.
And I can't help but think about, I think everybody's heard the cliche that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's a cliche for a reason. I mean, it literally is a permanent solution to problems that are going to go away, but you may not feel like that in the moment, right?
No, not at all. And the destruction that comes with it, you don't believe that there's going to be that much destruction. You think, I mean, yeah, maybe some people will be sad, but they're going to be way happier. They're going to be way happier that they don't have to deal with me, even though they were never dealing with me. I wasn't an issue for them. I just couldn't see that. I truly thought I was an issue for everybody. Wow. I thought I was an issue and a liability for my job. I thought I was an issue and a liability as a parent, as a friend. And
is it safe to say that the negative seed that planted in your mind and you decided to water and foster and grow, that's what led to this?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I just kept going down that path further and further. I mean, sleepless nights. No sleep whatsoever, maybe 2-3 hours, because I'm just up all night.
Which has to make it even that much more difficult.
So much more difficult.
You're exhausted. All you're doing is thinking negative.
Yep.
Everything's churning around in your brain. Nothing feels good.
Nothing does. You're not celebrating any wins. You're not enjoying any successes. And if there is a success, it's just like, whatever. Wow. About time. Kind of mindset. And then when something so minuscule at this point happens, it's like, yep, it just reassures me that I need to make this decision.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll give you guys a little bit more of my mindset. I actually brought a couple of letters
Wow.
that I had wrote.
So these are, what kind of letters are these?
So these were suicide letters. So I've got two of them here. One.
So you wrote these when?
These were the day before Monday, September 2nd.
Before
the day before I went into the hospital and went to my therapy appointment and everything.
Okay.
And I was pretty convinced that Tuesday was my last day. I was really, so wrote these out, had them out in the living room, and that was it. They would find them. And
I do know, I don't know what the percentages on this are, but I do know that not everybody that commits suicide leaves a letter.
No.
In fact, it's a very small percentage of people that leave any explanation, which goes to support that that suicide bomb theory, that people are thinking about this and wondering. Everybody wants an explanation. There isn't one really, but everybody wants an explanation. Like why?
Right.
Why would somebody make this decision when we know there's so much support? Which is, the thing that just turns them out. And so you're in the depths of this awful negativity the day before, and you had, I'm assuming since you wrote the letters that you had already made the decision, you had plans, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I knew exactly how I was going to do it. And I even had where. I mean, I had everything planned out, and fortunately it didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll get into this first letter though. This is one that I wrote to my son.
And how old is your son at the time?
He is 4 years old at the time.
Wow.
Of this letter, 4.5, almost 5.
Wow.
Or he had just turned 5. That's what it was. I think he had just turned 5. So I'll get into it. It says, Dear Chance, you are so amazing. I'm so proud to see you grow and accomplish things. You have done so well with school and soccer. You're going to be awesome. Buddy, you have a big job moving forward. You're going to have to be strong, brave, and loving. You'll have to really take care of sister and mommy. You have to be their strong red Power Ranger. He was in the Power Rangers back then.
Uh-huh.
You can do it all. As you grow up, I want you to be really strong, just like Pop and Unc. That's his grandpa and his uncle. I want you to be better than me. Listen to them and watch and learn from them. I want you to be the strongest man you can be. Keep working hard at school and soccer. Work hard and give everything you got in whatever aspect of life you face. Be the best you. I will miss you so much. So that was a letter to him.
That's powerful, Michael.
Yeah. I haven't read these letters. It's probably been about 3 years, I think. So I haven't had to face them in quite some time, but it's good though to review that because I get a really good understanding again of my mindset.
Yeah.
Though I didn't put anything negative, and I didn't give him any substance either. So when we talked about somebody writing a letter and you try to get validation, there's still no validation in this letter.
Because you imagine, had you gone through with this letter would be in his possession for the rest of his life, and he's going to read it off and on for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And he's going to wonder
why.
Still, why? I mean, obviously you care. You're giving him advice and you're telling, but he's going to wonder and not know so many things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even, when
he's 10 now.
Yeah. Yes. He'll be 10 this year. But yeah, so when I read those letters, and I went through these letters with my therapist, and I said to her, I said, I'm putting so much pressure on him. Like every sentence in that.
You gave him your job.
Yes. To a 5-year-old. Again, that just goes back to the mindset and how awful and poisoned I was, is that I wrote this to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Putting probably some of the most ungodly expectations that you could put on a child, I would say. Again, do my job, essentially at 5 years old.
Wow.
Never understanding outside of, some of the other male figures in his life, never truly knowing what it is to have a dad at 5 years old. Because he's only going to remember so much from 0 to 5
And
years.
somehow in your mind, this seemed better.
Seemed better. Seemed like I was doing the right thing for him.
Wow.
And for my daughter, which is, again, it's just so mind-blowing to think that that's where I was at.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So now my second letter was to my mom and dad. And so we'll get that one, and I'll explain a little bit more, because this one I think ties in a lot of stuff, and it's a very hard story to hear. So it said, this one's hard to read.
Mm-hmm. Take your time.
I know that this will be the hardest thing that you'll ever have to go through. I'm really sorry for this. There is nothing I can do to make you feel better about this. Please understand that my mind is so far gone. Every day is misery. I can't live life like this, and I'm unable to overcome this. I think this is the hardest part. Mom, I'm especially sorry to you. With what you had to go through with your dad. You now feel the other side of a son passing as well. I know that this is awful for you. I'm so sorry. My mom's dad, I think she was 9 years old. He committed suicide.
Wow.
So that was it was so I don't know how to explain that portion of things, of what my mom would have to go through a second time in her life. One, at a very young age. Essentially, her dad put her through the same thing that I was going to put my son through and my kids through. And then now she was going to have to do it again. Go through it again, but this time be her own child. So again, the mindset and how poisoned it is, that my mom has already gone through this, and I know it and I acknowledge it. And the only thing that I say is, I'm sorry that you're going to go through it again. And probably an even worse moment for her. And so that's where it's just so heartbreaking to read that and see that I was in that mindset, that I was going to put all these people in a horrible space based off my decision. But at the moment, I still thought I was doing the best thing for them.
So as you're writing this, you have some understanding, if you go through with this, the pain that it's going to create, because you've seen the other side of this,
right,
from your grandfather.
Yeah.
And it still seems like a good idea.
It still seems like a good idea, and I'm still victim playing too. You read that, I can't live life like this, which I did believe that. Yeah. But I was just going with the narrative that I had created and following through on. I believed that that's what it was. I believed that I couldn't overcome it. And I put it in words of that, and certainly thought that was it. And it just didn't matter. It didn't matter. I felt like I was going to be better when I was gone, and I still believed that everybody else was going to be better. So
that's some insight into what you were thinking then. Mm-hmm. We're nearly 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Now, what do those letters look like to you now?
Oh,
what goes through your mind when you read those? And
it definitely, obviously, it pulls at my heart, and it's heartbreaking for sure, because I feel for the person that was that. And just as any person who goes through this or ends up following through on suicide, I feel bad for them. I feel bad because you make life so hard on yourself. It's so easy to make life hard on yourself. And it's kind of weird to think that you can easily make your life hard. And so when I read those letters, I feel bad for that person that went through it. And, I had a friend as well who had committed suicide. And I remember when everything happened, I remember a lot of people being angry. And it was probably a year before or so I went into the hospital. And I was already going down that path. And to me, it was like, man, he must be happy that it's over. He must be happy that was my mindset. When he did that, I said, God, man, good for him, was almost the thought process.
Wow.
And so that's where I have such a different mindset from, the other side of people who don't have that same mindset of getting to those depths, that it's very hard. And it should be hard. It's not a normal thing. I don't think it's wrong at all to be upset about somebody who does that, because it is hard. It is hurtful, and whatnot. Just for me, though, when it does happen, or if it hasn't happened since, thank God. But if it happens again, I think I still have the same mindset, not in a good for them or they must be happy, but in I know exactly where they were at when they made that decision. And so that is heartbreaking, because I know that.
If you could go back in time to talk to, let's say, 6 years ago, and see yourself 6 years ago and have a conversation with yourself 6 years ago, what would you tell him? What would you tell Michael at that time?
I think it's so tough because there were so many different things that I had to do to get to where I'm at. So I think it'd probably be best to more so go through that process of what I had to do to get out of that situation, because I don't think it's a one conversation thing. It takes so much time and hard work, and you need breaks too. So I think I'd like to start there, because I just don't know if a conversation is going to be sufficient in that moment when you got that stuff going on.
Yeah. Stuff. Well,
more substance.
What I like about what you're saying is you made a choice to go down a negative approach or a negative mindset.
Yeah.
But then at some point in time, call it luck, call it whatever it is, you ended up on a path of help. You ended up to where you were able to change your mindset.
Yes.
Right? You need a little bit of help for people to show you how to do that. But you changed your mindset.
Yeah.
And I think I want to camp on the understanding of how much control that you had in this.
Oh man,
how much power did you understand the power like that you had in this at the time, or like what?
No. I did not realize the control that I had on my life and my actions, my responses, and everything like that. I had no clue. It was just easier to say, well, this just happens to me.
Yeah,
that's it. Like, I'm not gonna get better at that.
But how awesome is it now? I mean, how awesome! Like that's just hell. I mean, is what that is.
Yeah.
To be in that mindset for whatever reason it is, but then you go to a therapist and they taught you some skills, I assume.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, so I kind of wrote down a few different things of how I was able to overcome, and just some transparency. These are things that worked for me.
Yeah.
That, there's many different ways to go about this and whatnot. But I will say too that I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't have to spend a lot of money to get where I'm at either. So depression hits everybody, whether you have money or not, but just to give a little bit of transparency that.
But at the same time, if somebody were to try what you're about to lay down, if it doesn't work for them, there's probably other solutions too, right?
Absolutely. There are so many solutions out there. And it's just trying to find a fit for you. And that's where having a great therapist comes in, who can guide you. And I'm not saying therapy is for everybody. But when you do find somebody, it's important.
Yeah.
So the first initial steps obviously were getting out there and talking about it. And those were the phone calls. So you get through that portion of things. It's like, okay, great. And I was fortunate too that my therapist wasn't necessarily about getting in the depths of the negativity of my situation, but getting into the depths of what are some solutions. And it wasn't about telling me how to do it, right? It was asking me the correct questions and allowing me to figure it out. So that was big. I also wanted to create a strong inner circle. I knew I had a really strong one, but I needed one professionally and I needed one personally. So anybody who had any sort of negative effectiveness with them weren't involved in that inner circle.
Step one, get rid of the negative people in your life.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just get that out of the way. I also wanted...
If I can interrupt, Jim Rohn said that 5 years from now, you'll be exactly the same as you are today, except for the books you read and the people you spend time with. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was important to me. And part of my inner circle was not only the positiveness, but I need somebody who could hold me accountable too. I don't need people to tell me what to do. I need people to problem solve with me, because that's where a major issue is I wasn't problem solving. I was spiraling and assuming of what was going on. So I created a strong inner circle at work, at home, that was very similar, and people who had different qualities than me that I knew I could lean and depend on. And then the third thing I did was I reread a Dale Carnegie book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And when I reread that, I made a decision that day that I was going to practice that book, because I was doing exactly what he describes in that book as far as the negative mindset, making yourself sick.
So for those that aren't familiar with that book, Dale Carnegie also wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living was written, I think, in the 30s. Mm-hmm. What in that book stood out to you? Like actually, let's start with this. Obviously, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, that gives you a pretty good idea of what's in the book. But what's the premise of the book, and then what are some of the key things that stood out to you that made you want to make this a part of your life moving forward?
I was able to identify early that I was not accepting what I could and couldn't control, and then adding assumptions into the things that I had no control over. So I was creating a narrative that wasn't even true. I was just saying, this is what's going to happen to me. It's just terrible. I don't even know why I'm going to bother doing this. It's going to happen. I'm going to lose. And I'm sitting there spiraling, spinning negatively. And what I come to realize is, as part of the process when situations came up, was taking a deep breath. And this was hard to do, because you're talking changing the mindset, changing a lifestyle.
Changing a habit.
Changing a habit, yes. I had to ask myself, okay, what do you control and what don't you control? And if I didn't have any control over an outcome, then it didn't warrant my time, because there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah.
Now, if something bad happened, okay, what did I have control over beforehand to where I could have prevented it? What is my solution now moving forward? Because I can't stay stuck. Like, it happened, it sucks. I'm not stoked about it.
Yeah.
So I started to, with the strong inner circle of keeping me accountable, I went from a non-problem solver, essentially, in assumptions, to a problem solver. And instead of hours upon days of misery and thinking, I had moments.
That's huge.
Yes, and that was
that's part of the process, and that's something I think that's important to understand, is that if you're in a habit of thinking negatively constantly, if you're in a habit of always looking at yourself in a negative light, or always, ignoring the great things that have happened, and let's just focus on the one or two dumb things that I said that day, whatever the case is, if you're in that habit, to get out of that habit, it's you don't flip a switch, right? Nope. It looks clunky at first, and awkward, and takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's a lot of time up front, so I don't want to dismiss that it's hard work. It is very hard work.
Yeah,
but once you get past that hard work, it is very, very easy because, again, you've created a good habit, an easy habit. And that's the way now that I've chosen to live my life. And essentially it's a tool belt is what I like to call it. So where you're going through of talking about issues. If there's an issue that I'm having, if I'm feeling a little bit depressed, I've got my inner circle still. And it's not something that, pops up continuously, but, probably looking at once a year. Once a year, I think I deal with a little bit of a breakdown, and it's a minor one. And then I reach out to my inner circle and I say, I think this is what I got going on. I don't believe I'm reading this right. So then they'll go through and we'll ask the questions, and then I feel better immediately because I talked about it. So again, that's just part of the tool belt, along with understanding what I can and can't control. And because of that, though, I can eliminate 90% of the problems. And then there's still going to be, again, because of the depression just comes and goes sometimes for various reasons, I have to be able to counter that and use my tool belt and go into other tools. So if I can't get through it with, controlling what I can control, then it's talking about it. And then, you kind of continue from there.
Yeah.
Of what needs to be done. But once you get that down, the easiness of it is just phenomenal. That's for sure.
Would you say it's like learning a foreign language? I mean,
yeah.
Maybe you don't know a foreign language, but it's foreign. I mean, it's different. Mm-hmm. It's you're redrawing habits.
Mm-hmm.
It can be difficult, but obviously not impossible.
No, not
and obviously very worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. It's rewarding as can be. And again, I know that I had some luck in who I got to work with, personally and professionally was huge for me. And I think that just speaks to also the leadership team that you had. I don't know if anybody, whoever may be leaders out there, it might be something that you face. I hope you never have to face this, obviously, but your guys' leadership was so huge in that moment. And it went from the corporate office to our branch office down to our techs. It was every single person. You could just see everybody came together. And I was open book at that point. I said, well, I don't want to hide it. I mean, enough people know. I may as well keep going with it because I feel better. And that was, again, just a testament to what we had as leadership. And it wasn't coddling or anything like that either, which was great. It was, hey, we want you to get better. We're going to help you get better. We're not going to force you to get better, but we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And I never felt micromanaged about it. Certainly I had guys call and just say, hey, just want to check in with you, which was great. So I never felt like it was overbearing, and the doors were always open for me to come in and talk to, which was huge. And I just couldn't be more appreciative of that time in my life, those first initial 6 months, I would say. But it was great. Other things that I did too, I stopped drinking. I made a commitment. I made goals too. One thing I did too is I made goals, and one of them was to stop drinking. And not that I was drinking every day, but I was drinking on the weekends, and I was not drinking to have fun. I was drinking to bury whatever I could bury. And you're talking 30 pack on a Friday with a bottle, done by Sunday. And I'm only 135 pounds.
I was going to say that's a lot of beer.
It was bad. So I had to look at those initial steps too, coming out. So putting all these together. And once I got through those first 6 months, I started to feel really good. I didn't have to worry about anything at work. When I came back to work, I think I took a month off, came back to work, and it was great because I was able just to do my job without any excess, attention or pressure or anything like that. And at that company, we had what we'd call our score sheets and stuff like that, and hitting different numbers, sales numbers. I didn't have to worry about that first year that I came back, which was really good. I just needed to focus on my job and doing a quality job while I got everything personally together. And once I got through that first year, I remember I think I was having a conversation with Chris Drake, and we were going into 2021. And I told him, I said, I think I'm going to have a good year. He's like, yeah? It's like, yeah, I finally feel good mentally. Like all the work that we've done, I think I can just finally open up professionally because I don't have any more crap in my head. And I can really focus on getting better. And I had taken 2020 to learn a lot, too, as far as professionally, but I wasn't applying it at that point.
Yeah.
And so when I had said that, I think it was December of 2021 or 2020, I don't know. But we had the conversation. We went into that next first quarter, and I did really well that first quarter. And I actually won what we had at the time. We called it the Beast Award. And it was essentially our technician of the quarter. It was the first time that I'd won. And I was so ecstatic because it was all the hard work personally. And now I took all that energy and put it professionally. Nice. And had great success. And it reminded me of, as powerful as our minds are, that could be for negative and positive. I went from one extreme spectrum to the other with great success.
Yeah.
And that was the aha moment of, now I am fulfilled. And not that I was fulfilled and settled on who I wanted to be, because I always want to get better, but it validated all the decision making up to that point. It validated everybody's decision making. It validated the people who supported me. Yeah. Who walked through the fire with me, who trained me in everything. Everybody. It was just, it felt like I won the award, but it felt like a community award, because it was like, look what we did.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool that you saw it that way. Mm-hmm. And I want to like sit on that for a minute, because you went from, for those listening and pointing to these letters that you wrote, you went from feeling like nobody cared to feeling like an award you won. Yeah. Because you made the changes, you put in the effort. Yeah. You excelled. But to feeling like that was a group effort. How cool is that? How and I just want to say, anybody listening who might be closer to that writing the letter state in their mind, that there is hope out there. Yeah. Absolutely. And there is people. There is community.
It's a ton. There is a ton of people. Even if maybe you don't have the inner circle that I had. I know I'm fortunate at that point. There is an inner circle that can be built.
But you got to put in the work.
But you got to put in the work. And that's really what it comes down to, is there's no hack for hard work. There isn't. And I don't ever want to say that it was easy to get to this point.
How long did it take you? Like from, let's see if I can describe this or in a reasonable way. So from the letter writing state of mind, you're writing to your son, you're writing to your parents. Yeah. To the point where it started to become automatic that you thought positively instead of negatively. Like, how much time was between those two spots?
I'd like to say after the first 6 months.
Oh, okay.
So I would say that was it, is where things started to really come together and get easier. Now, certainly there was still quite a bit of work at that point that I was doing, because it was at that point just like, okay, now let's really lock this in and keep it going. I dealt with trauma and all that stuff. You get through those pieces of it in the first 6 months. And then after that, that's where I thought it started to become easier. And I even had setbacks in 2020. I think I'd gotten hurt. I had broke my shoulder, and I was out for, I think, a month and a half. And that was very difficult for me to deal with. But again, I had the mindset, and I said, okay, this really sucks. I'm not going to be working. I couldn't necessarily prevent this. Or maybe I could, but couldn't really prevent it. What can I do now? And I chose to go and get another license for work. I said, I have all this time. Why don't I just start studying?
And that's and what you're talking about, for anybody who doesn't know, that's essentially the basis of the book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Yeah. Because you can sit there and you can think about, well, why am I in this spot? This is so terrible. Yeah. How come I, and see only the negative, or you can make a goal. Yep. And you can focus on the goal, even if it's a small goal. It doesn't have to be a big goal. It needs, in fact, I would say it needs to be a small goal. Yeah. It needs to be a reasonable goal.
Right. Yeah.
And you start to, instead of being stuck in this loop of madness, you start to move forward and work on something that's positive and gives you a sense of belonging. And you got to want to do it, but you also have to understand that you have a choice in this. And that's one of the things that I've said over and over again. And I'll say this forever. If you have a victim mentality, you are not in control. If you want to be in control, take control.
Yeah, absolutely.
meaning if you want to come from a position of power, set goals. And you might be well, I can't do this, I can't do that, and you're focusing on everything. In almost every single thing that happens, almost every single thing that we do, you have a choice. There's something that you can be in control of, something that you can find that you can control. Mm-hmm. And it's important to figure out what that thing is, even if it's tiny. I mean, there's POWs that had literally everything stripped from them, including their clothes, and lived in little boxes, who found things for themselves to be in control of, their mind. They could take everything away from you, but they can't take their mind, I think is a quote from a POW in Vietnam. And find something that you're in control of, instead of waiting for somebody to bail you out and then being resentful that nobody comes along. And again, like you talked about, that may not be the solution for everybody, but I'd be surprised if it's not the solution for a good majority of people, at least a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Like you get to choose to think negative. You get to choose to think positive, and you're proof of that, because we're now closing in on 5 years from the letters. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at a guy who owns his own business, who has goals and aspirations, who smiles and laughs, and you're living a life that is so different than the man that wrote those letters.
Yeah, so much happier, so much more rich is what I'd say. And it's not like I have a ton of money still. I have a ton of appreciation is what I have. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that you want to focus on as well, is what are you thankful for? What can you appreciate?
It is impossible to be thankful. It is impossible to be grateful and depressed at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So and that's what I focus on now. And that's something that's easy, is it's easy to find the positives now, whether before it was extremely hard, or you just dismissed the positives and you just focused on the negative.
And again, you dismiss or you choose to accept.
Yes.
It is your choice.
Your choice completely. And
you get to choose this. You're not a victim of these thoughts, or just, you get to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've chosen to appreciate and I've chosen to focus on that. And when negative things happen, I say this a lot now, as I embrace the suck when something doesn't go my way.
Perfect.
I accept it and I say, okay, how do I change this, and how do I try to prevent this from happening again? And I problem solve.
Take control.
And that's it. And then I'll still find the positive in it. If something bad happens, like, well, hey, at least this didn't happen. You got to have that mindset. Yeah. It's like, that sucked. Man, that's a bummer. But hey, you know what? This didn't happen, and I know now we can do this and that to prevent that.
Yeah.
And that's where the mindset goes, and that's what I've trained.
And I love the story. I love the story of going from that darkness to the success that you have. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love the story because it's so empowering, simply because all of us have been somewhere along this path. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe not all the way there, but everybody has been on that path somewhere.
Yes.
Where we've just been so down, and we've let ourselves get there. Mm-hmm. And often when you let yourself get there, you don't realize the power that you have on both ends. You don't realize the power that you have. And I think that's really just one of the things to soak in and realize how much in control you are of these things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very important to understand. So, Michael, I mean, it is a great story. Like it's tragic, but then it's beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful that your parents and your son aren't reading those letters today. Yeah.
Wondering,
like, I don't know.
Because it still answers nothing.
It doesn't answer anything.
It doesn't answer anything.
Nothing. And really, what explanation is there for that type of an act? But you stayed the course. You found the solution. Mm-hmm. And like you said, maybe the solution that you found isn't the same solution that would work for other people.
Yeah.
But it'll definitely be a solution that can work for some people. And the main thing is stay the course.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If yours doesn't work for somebody, like there's something out there that will work.
Yes. Yeah.
So stay the course is the main thing. And so we're out of time, but I do want to thank you so much for sharing your story. We definitely need to have you back on the show to talk a little bit more about this. But I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Just such a powerful story. And I hope sometime in the future, you're working with people to help prevent this, even that much more than than telling your story.
Right.
Telling your story is going to be powerful, but hopefully that leads to you being, involved. And I do want to say thank you for listening to Alger Podcast. If you'd like to get more information or see other podcasts or listen to other podcasts, you can check out my website, which is algercoaching.com. That's ALGER, algercoaching.com.